Hello EDH enthusiasts, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going over the rules for every Magic the Gathering keyword. Feel free to skip through the video. The first keyword is Death Touch. Death Touch means that any amount of damage dealt by the creature is enough to kill the blocker. If a creature with First Strike is blocking a creature with Death Touch, the First Strike creature will survive and kill the creature with Death Touch before Death Touch takes place. That is, of course, if the Death Touch creature doesn't also have First Strike. Thanks to Rule 702.2c, we know that Death Touch and Trample work really well together. The creature with Trample only needs to assign 1 damage to each creature blocking it if it has Death Touch, then the rest goes to the player. That's the basics of Death Touch. The next keyword is Defender. Defender usually shows up on wall creatures, but just means that the creature can't attack. Notably, any old card that has the phrase "walls can't attack" on it loses that and has Defender instead. The third ability we'll talk about is Double Strike. Double Strike means that a creature deals both First Strike and regular damage. If a Double Strike creature uses the First Strike damage to kill a blocker, it is still considered blocked, and regular damage doesn't go through to the player unless the Double Strike creature has Trample. The next keyword is Enchant. The word enchant will be followed by a type or attribute. When you successfully enchant something that has the correct attribute, it now becomes attached, and when a creature with stuff attached to it dies, all the attached things go to the graveyard. Equip is the first keyword that has a cost on this list. To equip something, you also attach it, but when the thing it's attached to dies, it doesn't go to the graveyard. First Strike is an ability that allows creatures to do combat damage before other creatures. There are 2 separate combat damage phases, First Strike damage and regular damage. Creatures with First Strike deal damage during the First Strike phase. Flash is a keyword that means that the spell can be played at any time, even your opponent's turns. Creatures with Flash are very powerful to play as blockers when your opponents aren't expecting it. Flying is a simple keyword, which means it can't be blocked except by creatures with Flying or Reach. Creatures normally can't attack or use tap abilities when they first enter the battlefield, but if they have haste, that's not true. Hexproof is a keyword ability that stops your opponents from targeting a creature with spells or abilities. This ability affects only things that say target. If a creature gains hexproof while stuff is targeting it that's on the stuff on the stack resolves without doing anything. Indestructible means that something can't be destroyed. It can be exiled and sacrificed, and if its toughness hits 0 from a non-damaged source, then it will still go to the graveyard. Lifelink is a keyword that means whenever you deal damage with the source, you gain that much life. This includes fight and punch effects. Menace is an ability that means that a creature can't be blocked unless you double block it. It will deal damage to both blockers normally. Protection is one of the most overpowered keywords ever printed. A creature with protection from something can't be targeted by that thing, blocked by that thing, dealt damage by that thing, destroyed by that thing, enchanted by that thing, equipped by that thing, or basically affected in any way by that thing. Prowess is another very powerful keyword ability. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, so an artifact, enchantment, battle, or instant or sorcery, the creature will get +1/+1. Multiple instances of prowess stacked together. Reach is a keyword ability that allows creatures to block creatures with flying while still being able to be blocked on the ground. Trample seems easy, just deal the excess damage to a player, but really it's a little bit more complicated. A creature with Trample needs to assign enough combat damage to destroy the creature blocking it before it can deal damage to a player. Vigilance makes it so creatures don't tap to attack. Normally you can't attack and block in one turn cycle, but if your creatures have Vigilance, you can. This is also really good for land creatures, so that they can add mana and attack. The keywords we've covered so far are the main ones that show up in every set. If you're a new player, I would recommend clicking off now, but if you're an old, seasoned player, keep watching to see the more advanced keywords. First up, from Time Spiral Remastered, is Absorb. It's followed by a number, and that number is the amount of damage that gets prevented when the thing gets hit. Next up, from Ravnica Allegiance, is Adapt. This allows you to pay mana to put +1/+1 counters on the creature if it doesn't have any already. Next up is Affinity. This mechanic is somewhat recurring, but it mostly takes place on Mirrodin or when Phyrexians are involved. Affinity makes stuff cost 1 less as long as you have stuff with the correct attribute. Following affinity is Afterlife. Afterlife makes when your stuff dies, you can replace them with 1/1 spirits. Afterlife was the Orzhov mechanic from Ravnica Allegiance. Aftermath was a keyword appearing in Hour of Devastation. It allows you to cast the second half of a card from your graveyard later. Amplify is a mechanic that made a couple of appearances throughout the older sets of Magic, but hasn't in a long time. It allows you to put +1/+1 counters on a creature by revealing stuff with the same types. Annihilator is an ability appearing on most of the larger Eldrazi. It makes defending players sacrifice permanents when they get attacked. Ascend means that if you have 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. Cards with Ascend on them will usually give you benefits for having the city's blessing. Next up, a rare mechanic that only showed up in Future Sight is Aura Swap, which allows you to replace it with a card in your hand. Backup is the newest mechanic on this list. It allows creatures to give stuff +1/+1 counters and share their abilities for 1 turn. Banding is a static ability that modifies the rules for combat. Bands with Other is a special form of banding. If an effect causes a permanent to lose banding, the permanent loses all Bands with Other abilities as well. As a player declares attackers, they may declare 1 or more attacking creatures with banding and up to 1 attacking creature without banding, even if it has Bands with Other, that are all in a band. They may also declare that 1 or more attacking quality creatures with Bands with Other quality and any number of other attacking quality are all in a band. A player may declare as many attacking bands as they want, but each creature must be a member of only one of them. Defending players can't declare bans, but may use banding in a different way. See Rule 702.22J. All creatures in attacking band must attack the same player, planeswalker, or battle. Once an attacking band has been announced, it lasts for the rest of combat, even if something later removes banding or Bands with Other from 1 or more of the creatures in the band. An attacking creature that's removed from combat is also removed from the band it was in. Banding doesn't cause attacking creatures to share abilities, nor does it remove any abilities. The attacking creatures in a band are separate permanents. If an attacking creature becomes blocked by a creature, each other creature in the same band as the attacking creature becomes blocked by the same blocking creature. Example, a player attacks with a band consisting of a creature with flying and a creature with swamp block. The defending player who controls a swamp can block the flying creature if able. If they do, then the creature with swamp block will also be blocked by the blocking creatures. If one member of the band would become blocked due to an effect, the entire band becomes blocked. During the combat damage step, if an attacking creature is being blocked by a creature with banding, or by both a quality creature with Bands with Other quality and another quality creature, the defending player, rather than the active player, chooses how the attacking creature's damage is assigned. That player can divide that creature's combat damage as they choose among any creatures blocking it. This is an exception to the procedure described in Rule 510.1c. During the combat damage step, if a blocking creature is blocking a creature with banding, or both a quality creature with Bands with Other quality and another quality creature, the active player, rather than the defending player, chooses how the blocking creature's damage is assigned. That player can divide that creature's combat damage as they choose among any creatures it's blocking. This is an exception to the rule procedure described in Rule 510.1d. Multiple instances of banding on the same permanent are redundant. Multiple instances of Bands with Other of the same kind on the same creature are redundant. Battlecry is another Mirrodin mechanic, and it pumps every other creature that's attacking with the creature with Battlecry. Bestow is a Theros ability that allows you to turn your creatures into auras and enchant other things to share their power and toughness and their abilities. Blitz is the Riveteer family's ability from Streets of New Capenna. It allows you to give something haste if you're willing to sacrifice it at the end of the next turn. Bolster comes from Tarkir, and it helps your weak things become stronger with the help of the creature with Bolster. Bloodthirst is the mechanic from the Plane of Innistrad. This gives you benefit for attacking then playing creatures during your second main phase by making them bigger when they come down. The samurai on Kamigawa had the ability Bushido, which makes it bigger and stronger whenever it gets blocked or it does the blocking. Bushido is similar to Rampage, and both are very good with Trample. Buyback is a keyword that has appeared many times across Magic's history. It allows you to pay extra mana when you cast a spell to get it back into your hand once it's resolved. Next up is the Friend to Combo Player's Cascade. Originally appearing on Alara, this was one of the most powerful mechanics ever printed. Cascade allows you to dig through your deck until you find a spell with lower mana value and then you cast it for free. Casualty was the Maestro family's ability from Streets of New Capenna. It allows you to sacrifice creatures with power equal to the casualty amount to copy a spell. When you play a card with Champion, exile a card with the specified quality until the card with Champion leaves the play. If you don't or can't, you sacrifice the Champion. Changeling means that a card is all types. This applies to it in every single zone. The graveyard, exile, even outside of the game, it is all types. Channel is a keyword from Neon Dynasty. It allows you to discard cards to get a special effect. This does not count as casting a spell, so it can't be countered and it can't be increased in cost by taxing effects. Cipher is the Dimir ability from the first Ravnica block. It allows you to copy spells by encoding them onto a creature. Whenever that creature hits through, you get to copy the spell. Next up is something from Lorwyn. Not Planeswalkers, but the mechanic Clash. Two players who are chosen to clash each reveal the top card of their library. The one with the higher mana value wins. Then those players put that back on top or back on bottom. Connive is the Obscura family's ability in Streets of New Capenna. It makes the creature that's conniving cause you to draw a card, and then you discard a card. If it's a non-land card that you discarded, you put a counter on the creature. Conspire is an ability that lets you tap creatures that share a color with a spell to copy that spell. You can even tap creatures that have summoning sickness because it's not their ability being activated. Convoke is similar to Conspire, where you can tap creatures while casting a spell, but the creatures you tap instead reduce the cost of that spell by one or one of the colors that that creature has. Each of those creatures is saved as a state that is known as convoking that spell. That creature convoked the spell. Crew is an ability keyword that shows up on vehicles. It means you can tap an untapped creature multiple times until you've accumulated enough power to equal the crew cost. Then the vehicle becomes a creature. This also gets around summoning sickness. Cumulative upkeep is regarded as one of the worst abilities in all of Magic's history. At the beginning of each upkeep, you put an age counter on each permanent that has cumulative upkeep, then you pay the cost on it for each age counter it has. There's one good card with cumulative upkeep, and that's Braid of Fire, which adds mana rather than subtracting it. Cycling allows you to pay a cost and discard the card with cycling to draw a card. There's also other forms of cycling that we'll talk about later in this video. Dash allows you to give your creatures haste for an extra cost, and another part of the cost is that you have to return it to your hand once you're done with it. When a creature with Daybound enters the battlefield, if it's neither day nor night, it becomes day as it enters the battlefield. Then, as day-night gets tracked, it will switch between its Daybound and Nightbound forms depending on what time of day it is. Delve is an ability so powerful that they've banned most of the cards that have the ability. It allows you to exile cards from your graveyard to reduce the cost of the spell you're casting. In Return to Ravnica, the Azorius ability was Detain. It's basically pacifism, but as an ability keyword rather than a card. Devour is an ability that appears on creatures and allows you to sacrifice other creatures as that creature is played to put a number of +1/+1 counters on it for each creature you sacrificed. When you would draw a card while a creature with Dredge is in your graveyard, you may instead put that many cards from the top of your library into your graveyard to return the creature with Dredge into your hand. Echo is an ability that makes you pay a cost the turn after you play a creature to make sure you can keep it. It kind of helps to split up the cost, but usually is very bad. Embalm is an ability from Amonkhet that allows you to copy a creature in your graveyard and put it onto the battlefield, except it's a 4/4 zombie. When you cast a creature with Emerge, you may sacrifice a creature and pay the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's mana value, instead of the regular casting cost. Enlist allows you to add the power of other creatures to an attacking creature by tapping them. This ability does not get around summoning sickness. Entwine is an ability that appears on modal spells. You may pay the Entwine cost to choose both modes for the spell. Epic is a strange ability that stops you from being able to play spells for the rest of the game, except you get to copy the spell that has Epic at the beginning of each upkeep. It's kind of powerful, but also kind of weird. Also back in Ravnica, Simic got Evolve. Evolve allows you to put a +1/+1 counter on the creature with Evolve whenever you play a bigger creature that can be bigger in power or toughness. Evoke is an alternate cost found on permanent cards. When you pay the Evoke cost, though, you sacrifice it when it enters the battlefield. This usually is found on cards with an Enter the Battlefield ability. Exalted gives your creatures +1/+1 as long as they are attacking alone. Multiple different creatures with Exalted stack together, so by attacking with just one creature, you can make that one creature hit very, very hard. When you exert a creature, that creature becomes exerted. An exerted creature doesn't untap at the beginning of the next untap step, but it loses its exerted status. Exploit allows you to sacrifice a creature when the creature with Exploit enters the battlefield. The creature with Exploit exploited that creature. It will usually have an ability that cares about exploiting something. When a creature explores, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it in your hand. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on the creature, and then put it back on top or into your graveyard. Extort allows you to pay an additional white or black when you cast a spell. If you do, all of your opponents lose a life, and you gain the amount of life lost this way. Fabricate is a modal ability that allows you to put +1/+1 counters on the creature that it has, or create a number of 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens. A creature with fading enters the battlefield with a number of fading counters. At the beginning of each upkeep, you remove one. Once you can't remove them anymore, you sacrifice the creature. Fate Seal allows you to look at the top card of an opponent's library, then put it on top or on bottom. This way you can choose what kind of cards your opponents are going to draw. Fear means that a creature can't be blocked except by artifact creatures or black creatures. Flanking makes it so that blocking the creature makes the blocking creature get -1/-1 unless that creature also has flanking. Flashback allows you to pay a cost and exile the card from your graveyard to cast it. Back in original Kamigawa, there were double-sided cards like this. These cards would have the keyword flip. Flipping rotates it 180 degrees, allowing you to play with the other end. Forecast allows you to reveal a card from your hand and pay a cost to do an effect. These effects allow you to use higher mana value cards before you could regularly cast them. Foretell allows you to pay 2 and exile a card, and then you can cast it later from exile by paying a reduced cost. For Mirrodin is an ability found on equipment from All Will Be One. This makes a 2/2 token and attaches the equipment to it when you play it. Fortify is like an equip cost, but found on fortifications instead of equipment. A fortification gets attached to a land instead, and will give that land an additional ability. Frenzy increases your creature's power when they aren't blocked. It's kind of like the opposite of Rampage. Graft allows you to move +1/+1 counters from the creature with Graft to any creatures you play after that creature. Gravestorm copies a spell for each permanent that was put into the graveyard this turn. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is another ability that only appeared on one card. Haunt allows you to exile a creature from your graveyard after it's died. It gains the status of haunting another thing. It will affect that thing that it's haunting in some way or have an ability relating to that thing. Hideaway allows you to look at the top couple cards of your library and exile one. The card with Hideaway will then let you cast that exiled card once a certain condition is met. Horsemanship creatures can't be blocked except for by creatures that also have horsemanship. Incubate creates an incubator token with +1/+1 counters on it. You can then pay 2 mana to turn that into a 0/0 creature. Infect makes a creature deal damage to permanents and players in the form of -1/-1 counters and poison counters. If a player has 10 or more poison counters, they lose the game. Intimidate is the more modern form of fear. It allows a creature only to be blocked by artifacts and by stuff that shares a color with it. Jumpstart allows you to discard a card and pay a card's mana value to play it from the graveyard. Kicker allows you to pay an additional cost as you cast a spell. That spell becomes kicked and will have extra abilities for being kicked. Landwalk allows a creature to be unblockable as long as the opponent it's attacking has a land that has the specified attribute. Learn allows you to find a lesson card from outside the game and put it into your hand. If you don't have any lesson cards to get, you can discard a card to draw a card. Level Up allows you to pay a cost to put a level counter on something. The level counters will accumulate and give the creature new abilities as you get more of them. Living Weapon is the older Mirrodin ability. It creates a 0/0 Phyrexian Germ that it attaches the equipment to when you play it. When you discard a card with Madness, you may pay it its Madness cost to cast it. If not, it goes into your graveyard. Manifesting a card means putting it face down on the battlefield as a 2/2. If it's a creature card, you can pay its normal cast to turn it into the creature. You may put a card with Megamorph from your hand face down onto the battlefield for 3 mana. While it's face down, it's a 2/2. You may pay its Megamorph cost to flip it over and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Meld allows you to pay a cost or meet a requirement to combine 2 cards you control into 1 card by flipping them over and combining them. When a creature with Mentor attacks, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a target attacking creature with less power. When you draw your first card each turn, if you draw a card with Miracle, you can cast it for its Miracle cost. This will be a greatly reduced version of the same effect. Modular puts +1/+1 counters on the creature. When that creature dies, you move its +1/+1 counters to any other artifact. You may pay a creature's monstrosity cost and put +1/+1 counters on it. It gains the status ability Monstrous, which deactivates the monstrosity ability. Morph is like Megamorph, but when you flip it, it doesn't get a +1/+1 counter. Multi-Kicker allows you to play an additional cost any amount of times. An extra effect will happen for each time you paid the cost. Mutate is another messy ability from Ikoria, so I'm going to read the rules text. Rule 702.140, Mutate. Mutate appears on some creature cards. It represents a static ability that functions while the spell with Mutate is on the stack. Mutate cost means you may pay cost rather than pay the spell's mana cost. If you do, it becomes a mutating creature spell and targets a non-human creature with the same owner as this spell. Casting a spell using its mutate ability follows the rules for paying alternative costs. As a mutating creature spell begins resolving, if its target is illegal, it ceases to be a mutating creature spell and continues resolving as a creature spell and will be put onto the battlefield under the control of the spell's controller. As a mutating creature spell resolves, if its target is legal, it doesn't enter the battlefield. Rather, it merges with the target creature and becomes one object represented by more than 1 card or token. This spell's controller chooses whether the spell is put on top of the creature or on bottom. The resulting permanent is a mutated permanent. An ability that triggers when a creature mutates triggers when the creature mutates. A mutated permanent has all abilities of each card and token that represents it. Its other characteristics are derived from the topmost card or token. When you have an unblocked creature, you can replace it by a creature in your hand by paying that creature's ninjutsu cost. Offering allows you to sacrifice something to decrease the cost and give a spell flash. There's different types of offering, and each of them requires a specific attribute. Overload is an alternate cost you can pay to make something target every permanent instead of just one. When a creature with Persist dies, if it had no -1/-1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield with a -1/-1 counter on it. Phasing makes it so that your creature or permanent is phased out every other turn. You only get the creature for half of the time. Poisonous gives a player poison counters in addition to regular damage when dealt by a creature with Poisonous. Populate allows you to copy a token you control. Proliferate allows you to choose any number of permanents and or players, then give each another counter of each kind already there. This includes -1/-1 counters, +1/+1 counters, loyalty counters, and poison counters. Prototype is an alternate cost that can be paid when casting an artifact creature to give it a different color and power and toughness. It keeps its abilities. Provoke allows you to force a creature to block a creature with Provoke if it's able to block that creature. Prowl allows you to pay a reduced cost to cast a creature spell if you've dealt damage with a creature that shares a type with it. Rampage buffs your creatures whenever they get double, triple, quadruple, more than 1 block. Read Ahead allows you to choose any chapter number and start on that chapter when casting a saga. Rebound allows you to exile the cards you cast. Once you've cast them, the effect resolves and then it goes to exile. The next upkeep, you can cast the spell again. When a creature enters the graveyard, you may pay a recover cost to return a spell with recover to your hand. Reconfigure is like Bestow for artifact equipment creatures. Whenever a reconfigure creature isn't attached to something, it's a creature. Regenerate removes damage from a creature, stops it from being destroyed, and removes it from combat. Reinforce allows you to pay some mana and discard a card to use an effect to put +1/+1 counters on something. When a creature with Renown deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter and it gains the status effect Renowned, which disables the Renown ability. When you cast a spell with Replicate, you may pay the Replicate cost any number of times. Copy the spell for each time you paid it. Spells with Retrace can be played from your graveyard by paying the regular cost along with discarding a land card. When you play a creature with Riot, you can choose to give it a +1/+1 counter or haste as it enters the battlefield. When you cast a spell with Ripple, you look at the top cards of your library and reveal each that shares a name with it. You may cast all the revealed cards without paying their costs. Scavenge allows you to exile a creature card from your graveyard to put +1/+1 counters onto another creature equal to the power of the creature that you exiled. When you scry X, look at the top X cards of your library, put them back on top or bottom in any order and any combination. Creatures with Shadow can only be blocked by creatures with Shadow. They can also only block creatures with Shadow. A creature with Shroud can't be the target of spells or ability, not even your own. When you cast a creature with Soul Bond, it becomes bonded to another creature. Both of those creatures will share an ability specified by the card with Soul Bond. Soul Shift allows you to put a spirit of less mana value onto the battlefield when a creature with Soul Shift dies. Spectacle is an alternate cost that you may pay if an opponent has lost life this turn. When you cast a spell with the specified attribute, then you may pay a spell's splice cost and reveal it from your hand. This card's effect is added to the card. While a spell with Split Second is on the stack, no one else can play spells and activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. When you cast a spell with Storm, copy it for each spell that you've cast before it this turn. When you cast an artifact creature with Sunburst, put a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana that you use to pay its cost. These usually will cost 5 mana, so have a max of 5. To support X, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to X target creatures. You don't have to do that many, but it's up to that many. To Surveil, look at the top card of your library. You can put that card into your graveyard or just put it back on top. Suspend is an alternate cost that can be paid. When you pay the alternate cost, exile it with a number of time counters on it. At the beginning of each upkeep, remove a time counter. Once there's no more time counters, cast the spell without paying its mana cost. Totem Armor is an ability found on auras. When a creature with a Totem Armor aura on it would be destroyed, destroy the aura instead. Toxic is just the same as Poisonous. Transfigure allows you to pay the Transfigure cost and sacrifice a creature to search your library for a creature with equal converted mana cost and play it. Transmute allows you to discard the card with Transmute and pay the Transmute card to search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost and put it into your hand. When a creature with Undying dies, if it had no +1/+1 counters on it, return it to the battlefield and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Unearth allows you to pay an Unearth cost to return a creature from the graveyard to the battlefield. The next time it would be destroyed, or at the end of the turn, whichever one comes first, exile it. Unleash allows you to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, but the creature with a +1/+1 counter on it can't block. Vanishing is the same as fading. When a creature with Ward is targeted by a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter that spell or ability unless the opponent pays the Ward cost. And a creature with Wither deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. Thank you for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss another one.